It all started with the 2 goalposts. Flatten the curve. Don't overwhelm the healthcare facilities. Somehow we've gone from 3,000 ICU beds in Minnesota to 1,200, and nobody ever explained that. I'm sorry. I think we have to ask, is the person who's charged with maintaining science in the state of Minnesota doing the job so well that she should continue to hold the job? Or is it time for us to ask the hard question? Is it time for Jan to leave?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Scott Jensen podcast. My name is Andy Schmidt, and I'm here with Dr. Scott Jensen, and we're back. We're going to jump into it. I've been on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all over the place listening or seeing these emails, and this guy, I don't know who he is, his name is Tim Mankato. You want to tell me who Tim Mankato is?
Well, I guess Governor Walz has been accused of being less than transparent because Tim Mankato is one of his email addresses. And people have asked for a public disclosure of emails and done so appropriately with the FOIA process, the Freedom for Information Act. And so there's been a lot of hubbub, if you will, about Governor Walz, are you coming clean? Are you really being transparent? And I think that spills over into his commissioner of the Department of Health. And I think that's also a big issue for the public because they're saying, if Governor Walz isn't being completely transparent, has Commissioner Jan Malcom been transparent?
Well, I mean, you seem to be leading on this, like, I don't this case against Jan Malcom. And do you want to tell, why are you the leader here? Well,
it's interesting that you say that I'm the leader, and I appreciate your recognizing that, but I would almost say that unwittingly, we're seeing the Star Tribune and other media sources help lead on this. They're giving us the information. After all, the Star Tribune has arguably been the largest purveyor of information to Minnesotans. And all of the information they're giving us is basically what Commissioner Jan Malcom and her Department of Health are feeding them. When Commissioner Malcom decides to change the data being presented because it maybe doesn't look as alarming, what's happening there? So I think that we can thank some of the media sources for being, if you will, part of that transparency because I don't think that Commissioner Malcom has been, if you will, transparent. Let me ask you a bunch of questions, if I could, Andy. I mean, you maybe don't follow it quite as closely as I do, but I have been following this. I've been following this since January of 2020. Okay, we hear all the time, Minnesota's leading. We've got the best rate of vaccination. We've got this and that. Okay, but what's our case rate? Right now, we're number one in the nation on the case rate. I thought that Commissioner Malcom and Governor Walz were saying that we were doing so incredibly well. So does this kind of performance warrant the continuation of one's high-level job? I think that's an adequate question for us to ask. Emails. I mean, we've certainly seen lately this distribution of emails where between Governor Walz's staff, his chief of staff, Jan Malcom, comments like, we need to be more creative. What you're giving me doesn't really give us a compelling story for the policies that we want to pass. Basically, we're hearing Jan Malcom's team express disappointment that they can't somehow be fed information that will give this compelling case, regardless of truth. It isn't about truth. It's about telling the story, the narrative that they want. Is that kind of performance justification for Jan Malcom to continue to be Commissioner of Health? I think it's an adequate question to ask. Culpability. I remember a year ago it was November of 2020, where we had more emails where we saw some of the people that Commissioner Malcom works with exchanging emails saying, well, if we could somehow tie this spread to parents who are going to kids' events, and then maybe maybe later that day, they might go out for a beer or something at night, and then the next day they'd go to their workplace and spread the disease. It was clear by some of these emails that there was a casual willingness to hold others culpable when the fact of the matter is the policies that had been put in place by the Department of Health weren't cutting it. Is that the kind of justification for continued employment on Jan Malcolm's part? The boosters. We jumped the gun on the boosters. Boosters. Before CDC, FDA, and the federal government were saying it, we had people, if you will, providing conflicting information to Minnesotans. Again, the data presentation, what matters. I remember they used to give the 7-day trailing average, I think, and that got to looking pretty good. So all of a sudden that was gone.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Kevin Roche, who's a very, very smart statistician and really knows healthcare in and out. And he has complained about this over and over again. I mean, honestly, I think all Minnesotans should ask, is the performance that we've seen from Jan Malcom the high-level performance we would expect from arguably the person who is charged with making certain that when it comes to Minnesota policy, that science is held larger and over political science. I mean, she is the person, presumably, that should be saying, we're doing science, we're not going to do political science. But when you see these emails and you see this lottery rollout of the vaccines and you see this conflicting information, I don't think that I can say that Jan Malcom has been an A performer, that's for sure. You might wonder, why am I speaking out on it? I mean, I taught at the University of Med School for 35 years. I've been teaching med students and residents for a long time. Our family's a medical family. We have doctors and lawyers and veterinarians and undergraduate degrees in physiology and microbiology, and we talk about this stuff.
Well, it seems to me to be some sort of correlation between a corrupt politician and that same person not being able to use their emails, because we saw the same thing in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and it seems like people don't know how to use their emails. But that's a sidetrack. I just want to say, well, I want to ask a question about political science and science. I want to dig deeper into that, because I think that that's an interesting thing. We talk about that. You hear that all the time. You hear, this is the real science. This is the real science. And you're hearing it from people who don't study. They don't study the real sciences. They study the political sciences. And so it's very confusing for the average person to know what's political science and what's real science. And so how are people supposed to even differentiate these two things? Because they sound the same. They got the same word in them. But how are you supposed to differentiate between them?
I think that, frankly, the word science has been bastardized when you use it in the context of political science. There is no science there. If science is a process of observing and measuring, creating a hypothesis, and then, if you will, setting up experiments to prove or disprove your hypothesis, we don't do that in the world of politics. I think it should just be called politics, or you could call it political sociology, would probably be more relevant. But this is inappropriate to consider so much of what we've seen happen through the Department of Health as science. This was political pandering. This is messaging. This is spin doctoring. That's what this is. People have asked me, what would you have done differently, Scott? Well, frankly, the lockdowns were proven fairly early on that they weren't accomplishing what we were told they would. Whether you're locking down businesses, locking in nursing home residents with active disease in the facility, or locking out kids, they didn't work. We saw that on the East Coast, and we certainly didn't have to do it in Minnesota, and we didn't have to do it twice. One size doesn't fit all. We saw that all over the nation, and yet this was the policy that was enacted over and over again in Minnesota.
Well, so what makes you different, though? Like, you're leading the charge. You're not giving into the fear. And I saw, and we all saw, that when COVID happened, 2 years ago, this whole COVID thing happened, and everybody was just jumping on the bandwagon of we need mandates, we need shutdowns, we need to just everything needs to be shut down. And it felt like after a while you started to say, well, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. Let's start to look at the real science and not the political science here. So what makes you different? I don't understand. Why were more people not standing up and saying no?
It's a valid question. I think that sometimes we find ourselves on a path that we wouldn't necessarily have chosen, but we realize that if not me, then who? For me, I think my counselor is always my wife, and Mary and I spent a lot of tearful nights wondering about why we were on the path we're on.
Yeah.
We feel very convicted by the words of Esther 4:14 for such a time as this. We just didn't see anybody else more equipped to be in this situation. I was in the Senate. I was vice chair of the Health and Human Services. I've been a longstanding professor at the University of Minnesota. I started my own clinics. I've hired dozens of nurses and medical assistants and medical receptionists. I've been giving lectures on coding, so I understood right away some of the coding shenanigans that went on with COVID-19, whether you were using U07.1 or 0.2. I understood right away what was happening when CMS said, well, we're gonna put a little spiff on if you use that diagnosis on a discharge summary. I think that for whatever reason, there I was. And it seemed critically important that I not shy away, because if I did, I wasn't sure that the truth would come out. I think there were other people leading on other things that I maybe didn't lead as much on. I think the whole idea of outpatient therapeutics, whether you're talking about budesonide or hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or zithromax or colchicine or all these, there are people out there that led more forcibly than I did. I thought that they had a lot to say. But I think when it came to just the truthfulness, I mean, I was so frustrated with the models and the fact that Governor Walz wouldn't share the models. And then Jan Malcom would get up and sort of deflect on the questions regarding the models. We weren't told what the presumptions were. And then the masks. If Jan Malcom had come out and said, we've been telling you for the last 3 or 4 months, don't wear masks, but we're going to change our opinion now. And these are the studies that tell us why we should change. But she didn't do that. All of a sudden, everybody got religion. And it didn't matter if you were wearing a good mask, like an N95 mask, which still isn't, if you will, 100% protective against COVID-19. But we were telling people you could wear cheesy masks like a kerchief. We had people wearing virtually mosquito screen nets, and they were saying these were masks. We didn't get that kind of information from Jan. We got a smoke screen, and we got it over and over again. And then we were told, we won't do the mandates. Well, by dang George, we're doing mandates, aren't we? I mean, if you take away all of our privileges and tell us it's not a mandate, you're just lying to us. If you take away someone's livelihood, someone's job, their inability to, you're putting them in a spot where they can't take care of their family, pay their bills. There's been no transparency on the part of the Department of Health. And I think Jan Malcom has to answer for that. If I had an employee and they just wouldn't ever say, Dr. Jensen, I'm sorry, I messed up on that. That submission of the blood sample that got messed up, that was my fault. If someone did that and then wouldn't acknowledge it, that wouldn't be a good part of that employee's review when it came time to give them a raise or to continue their employment. I think we have to ask ourselves, how in the world did we get to a point where we decided arbitrarily that natural immunity after you've recovered from the disease, despite the fact that Israel and Portugal and England and Iceland were all telling us that natural immunity was far more robust than a two-step immunity, particularly when we start to see data come in that by 4 to 6 months, we were seeing the mRNA vaccine immunity drop off pretty dramatically. Nobody came forward and told us that. Over and over again. Informed consent was kicked to the side of the road. Informed consent means exactly that. You have to inform the patient and you have to get their consent. And bullying them, coercing them, mandating them is not informed consent. When did informed consent become not a requirement? These are the kinds of things that have gone on. And I would ask the question, is this the kind of performance that tells Minnesotans that yes, Jan Malcom should be the leader of the Department of Health. Jan Malcom should be the person who walks at the right side of Tim Walz and guides him in his decision making, because it's clear from Tim Walz that he is not going to worry too much about the science. He came out just a week or two ago and made a comment that, well, I'm not going to go ahead with any kind of emergency power activation again, not because it's the right or the wrong thing to do, but because of the political fallout. So we know what he's listening to.
And we know that science,
he's focusing on the political fallout. He's got a commissioner of the Department of Health who's saying, hey, listen, this is where we're at, and it's not based on science. Instead, it's based on political pandering. I think at some point in time that people have to ask, what's going on? I mean, look at the supply chain of healthcare workers. We're making it worse. Our policies are making the supply chain worse. What does that do? Well, follow it upstream. If we fire more healthcare workers, we're going to have less staff able to take care of these beds. So then we take these beds off the docket. Now, the denominator is smaller, so the same 1,100 patients over 1,200 beds is now 1,100 patients over 1,100 beds, and we're 100% full. We created the problem. Again, I'd ask the question, is this kind of performance that warrants continuation of employment in arguably the most impactful, transformative event in my lifetime? I think we have to ask that question.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you one more question, because I think this is a question that people usually are not willing to ask anyone that's running for office, is like, how can the people trust that you're not going to be the same? If you become the governor, how can people trust that you're not going to take the same route? Because power corrupts, and
power corrupts, absolutely.
Right. So how do we know that that's not going to happen to you?
I didn't flinch. 5 times my license has been investigated. 5 times I have had to deliberate and spend hours and hours and hours creating a response to the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice so that I could continue to take care of the thousands of patients who depend on me to help care for them. When USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, all of these publications came after me, I didn't flinch. So I think that'd be counting for something. I think the other thing is I've been pretty darn clear. I don't like politics. I like solving problems. That's my life. I've been pretty clear. I'm not looking for a new career path. I'm a family doc, and I expect to go back to doing that once I'm done being governor. And I've been pretty darn clear that I will do whatever it takes to solve problems. And if that means that I have to take the slings and the arrows, I'll do that. Because at the end of the day, when you're 67 years old like me, you could say, what could be more important for Scott Jensen in the remainder of his life than to help right this ship so that never again do we have emergency powers abused and used for political purposes, so that never again science is sacrificed at the altar of political pandering, and so that never again do we perform so miserably as we have here, because we have performed so miserably. Remember, Andy, it all started with the 2 goalposts. Flatten the curve. Don't overwhelm the healthcare facilities. Somehow we've gone from 3,000 ICU beds in Minnesota to 1,200, and nobody ever explained that. I'm sorry. I think we have to ask, is the person who's charged with maintaining science in the state of Minnesota doing the job so well that she should continue to hold the job? Or is it time for us to ask the hard question? Is it time for Jan to leave?
Absolutely. I think that's great. And I think we'll end on that, and we'll move into what we always do is, what's good, Scott? So what's good?
Well, I think what's good is that we are seeing around the world people waking up. And I think in the waking is a certain confession that we've been complacent, that maybe we didn't realize that when Ronald Reagan made some comment about freedom being just one generation away from extinction, maybe we didn't take him seriously.
Yeah.
But what's good in my life is that I think there's brothers and sisters around the globe, numbering millions and literally billions, saying, we stand together. Nothing matters more than freedom.
Absolutely. My throat hurts for some reason. But anyways, can I give one? I usually don't do a what's good, but something really good happened to me. I got engaged and I'm getting married in January. So I wanted to let everybody know that. So
Andy, that's exciting.
There you go.
That's exciting.
That's what's
Congratulations.
Good. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. And
Andy, did you tell your fiance yet? You already asked her. Okay.
No, I forgot.
So this is a done deal.
This is a done deal.
Okay, all right.
All
right. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm trying to shut this thing out. Okay, just let me do my job. All right. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Go to drscottjetson.com. Listen to the rest of the podcast, and I think that's about it. We'll see you guys next one. Goodbye.
Thanks.